Hi, welcome to class. We're the only two right now, but the other ones will show up eventually, right? I hate my life. I hate my life.
A Professor Sunrise Productions!
Hello class, Professor Sunrise here. Are you tired of losing to Eldlich? I'm not, because I'm a good player. I'm just kidding, but in this video we are going to talk about a lot of things you can do to step up your game against Eldlich, how to play around floodgates, how to read the back row, how to adapt your game plan to the Eldlich playstyle. So, without further ado, don't forget to like and subscribe and leave some feedback down in the comment section below. And for you brave virtual players out there, I will have an extra section in this video where I'm going to talk about my experience in the matchup. So, let's get right into the video. So before going into detailed tips and tricks against Eldlich, you guys have to realize that going up against a low tempo stun deck like Eldlich drastically takes up the tempo out of the game, so you always keep that in mind when deciding on plays. This can be taken to your advantage by just passing a turn and basically paying life points, a few life points, mostly not more than 500 to 3.5k to draw a card, as a lot of times Eldlich cannot go for game in a single turn. Depending on the variant, of course, this can definitely change, and some variants, for example, playing with Branded and Dogma, have a way easier time to go for game. So definitely don't take this lightly, but a lot of time this can be the game-changing thing, as a single piece of extra engine or a blowout card like a Lightning Storm, Twin Twister, Cosmic can make a huge difference. A good save point can be having one way to stop the second effect of Golden Lord and Graveyard. Is usually a safe space for you to be at, because this alone is 3.5k attacks, and if the opponent is missing that, they usually cannot go for an OTK. Talking about stopping Golden Lord effect in Grave, the most effective way to stop that is by very good low impact hand traps like DD Crow, Ghost Bell, and Edge, which are on a lot of decks right now. These cards are very good as they hit a lot of common meta matchups, and most importantly are decent cards in the Eldlich matchup, at least to some degree. They at least do something against the deck and are not completely dead in the matchup. While of course hitting their floodgates and traps in general are way better and way stronger, just hitting their tempo engine enough can be easily to buy you 2 to 3 turns and get your own game plan going. Draw those cards, draw the extra engine which lets you play through the back row. So try to prepare your side and main deck in a way that your Eldlich matchup doesn't contain any dead cards in it, as the matchup can be very tough if you have 1 or 2 dead cards in the hand, as it's kind of like the Flunder matchup where you just compare your hands, and if you have enough to play through the back row, you win, and if not, you usually lose. So it's very bad in those matchups to have a dead card in hand. As a quick extra side note or extra win condition, keep in mind that if you banish both Golden Lords, the opponent basically has no win condition whatsoever. There's very little the deck can do, at least for the hard stun locks, which are usually the most represented decks, but this can definitely change and is like subjective, not objective. But basically, if you get rid of 2 Golden Lords, the opponent's Golden Lands don't do anything, and at best they can hope that they can sit on a rank 5 of choice, usually the bounce guy, but basically takes out like the win condition they have. So if you can, for some reason, get rid of both Golden Lords, maybe by getting rid of that one with the Caught by the Grave, and the other one with the DD Crow, for example, which you sided in because you don't want a dead card, this can easily win you a game. So if you have the chance to do that, definitely keep that in mind, as this can definitely steal wins out of nowhere. So with this information now, you know how to handle the advantage engine Eldlich, but how do we navigate their board effectively, which is by far the hardest part and can be the most punishing. As one general tip, keep in mind that it's do not use targeting back row destruction like Twin Twisters and Cosmic Cyclone just blindly on the back row. While this of course is very beneficial to deal with cards like Torrential, Strike, and Punishment, those cards do somewhat trade fairly against your cards. Usually they go like 1 for 1 or 2 for 1. But most importantly, the floodgates on the other hand can be complete blowouts and stop your whole turn right away if you just blindly walk into them. So at best, chain your twins and cosmics to the activation of those floodgates and prioritize dealing with them as soon as possible. Adding to that, it's very important that you learn how your deck gets hit by the most common traps, so you can start to read your opponent's back row. So you know how you can navigate your engine through it while not getting locked out by floodgates or dodging a nasty torrential tributes. Knowing that if your opponent uses their torrential at this exact spot in your combo usually means they're forced to do so because they have nothing left. They have no better disruption, meaning they probably don't have anything at all to deal with you after you play through that. Knowing all this things are super important, as once you've played through all of your opponent's back row and you know the last card, if they have any at all, is just a useless Eldlich card, you in turn can turn on the heat and finally commit to the board. And even low on resources like that, because you played through like a few back row, this is usually way too much for Eldlich to handle, especially if your deck can just sit on a Zeus for a turn, as the deck has a very hard time to out that. Adding to the last point, if your deck has little to no real room to play under the 3 most common floodgates, Rivalry, Gozen, and Skill Drain, for example a deck like Prankets, which is like very popular of course in the meta right now, you are basically forced, at least in my opinion, to over-prepare for the deck. And this doesn't mean that low impact hand traps are fine. You need to see that floodgate out to play it all, because the Prankets engine doesn't do anything under floodgates. Of course they do have their DPE, which is the whole win condition on their own, but that's usually not enough. It might seem bad, but Eldlich is gaining more and more representation, and it's one of the more budget-friendly decks out there, depending on the variant of course, so it might be even over-represented for what it's good at, because people don't have the money to play anything else, and it's just a very good thing. So while it might not be the strongest, it's still going to be there, and you have, if you deck cannot play under it at all, you have to respect that, and at best just over prepare for the deck, as the Prankets engine is really good on its own. So you definitely, even if you have like not the most perfect, most optimal side deck against all the other meta matchups, at least you can still win those if you draw good. But if you don't have the outs against Eldlich, and even if you draw perfect and you have no outs, it doesn't do anything and you will just lose these matchups. And you definitely don't want to go on a tournament and have a day where you matched up against Eldlich twice and you didn't prepare for it at all, and you just get tilted out of the sky because you couldn't do anything. And lastly, to everyone's despise, yes, Brave Engine is very good against Eldlich if you use it correctly and carefully. It being a bounce and an Omni Gate makes it borderline impossible to break a board with Brave in addition to 1 or 2 other engines, for example Prankets, DPE, whatever there is, Despia, when it can lock you out of the game, because it being a fairy earth on the token can be really detrimental to your game plan, because there are very few decks which can navigate with that on the board. Its value is nothing to scoff at, and you should prioritize resolving it later on in the turn, once you hopefully dealt with all the floodgates, as Griffin control on its own can be a win condition in a simplified game state against Eldlich. And against Eldlich, a simplified game set like that can easily happen, where you just put them on like 1 or 2 Eldlich cards which are easily dealt with a Griffin. So definitely, if you have a Brave Engine, you have to somewhat use it differently in the matchup. Most of the time it's usually Brave Engine first and then you do the other plays. Going first, this of course is still the way, but going second, you can definitely just lose games by just activating right and then getting hit by a Gozen or a Rivalry on that, and you have no way to get your own engine going, and then they just run over the token and you basically lost the Brave Engine. Otherwise you could have maybe used the other engine first and with that force out the floodgate, and then you just slam that right after that and you continue to place with the Brave Engine. So definitely keep that in mind if you are playing Brave Engine like I do. So all of these tips were very general and didn't really specify it to any engine apart from the Brave part, but that's basically everywhere, so it's pretty general, let's be real. The next few tips are for all of you Mami Shanshan enjoyers like I am out there, who want to know what the virtual deck does exactly against the Eldlich engine, how it navigates through the floodgates effectively. And while this is very suited to Brave Virtual and Virtual in general, of course, you can still definitely pick apart 1 or few tips of those and apply them to your own deck, and maybe get something out of my thought process for your own deck. Mommy, Shanshan is so cool. So here we are at the deck list I've been currently using to pretty good success. This is basically the same list as in the deck profile, or the last few deck profiles I actually did. So let's just get right into what I do with Virtual World to play through Eldlich boards. So as you can see, I didn't order it like that here, but the Virtual World engine itself is actually insane against floodgates. You have 1/2 of the engine being the tuner part, with it being Psychic Winds. This also gets supported by a Griffin Rider, and in the extra deck you have Wind Psychics in the form of Juju, Shanshan, Charge Warrior, Crystal Wing to some degree, but we'll take it out of this one, and most importantly a Baron. So this whole package can play under Gozen, and most of it can play under Rivalry, and most importantly, this part of the engine does have a toolbox out in Juju, and it also has Shanshan, which is basically a win condition on its own, as Eldlich cards cannot do anything once they get banished. So if they don't get into the graveyard, they have no grind whatsoever. So you take out like all of the juice, all of the gas the deck has. So even if you cannot really break the board and they used like a lot of their traps, they're just drawing 1 for turn and that's it. And we still have Shanshan available to us, so this can definitely wins on its own, games on its own, sorry. So definitely put value on that. And the other half of the deck is Earthworm. So we have Gigi, Lily. To some degree, you have the token in it. So if you can definitely play with the right first. If you are not scared about a Rivalry and you know the opponent has a Gozen because it's already flipped up, for example, you can play that and you also, most importantly, have a fun in the extra deck, which can in turn also out floodgates. So both parts of our engine can out floodgates on their own and can realistically get there. If you have like 2 GGs, for example, you do normal one, get the other one, you can get Qinglong in the grave, you can get a Lily, you can get to a Chucha, and with the Chucha you can make the GG level 6, and so you can get it to Fan. And if you have E-Tailor Lulu, for example, you can summon Neon with the E-Tailor, go for Lulu, and then you can go into Juju and use both of them in the graveyard, banish them, and use the Juju effect. So both half of the engines can play under one floodgate. It locks you out of the other one, but the good thing is that both of them, like I said, have an out to the floodgate. But most importantly, we have a card like Chucha, which is super accessible by the one part of the engine being the Psychic Wind part, but also just by a hard draw Kowloon. And this card is godsend in this matchup. It can out any floodgate, and your priority should be to get Chucha available as soon as possible. Also in a grind game, this is super easy to get alive, of course, with the Juju, with the Shen, so you definitely want to keep this card on the field if possible. The Brave engine, of course, everything I talked about earlier with the Brave engine still stands true with the Brave Virtual World list. Something to add here is that you have access in the extra deck to a Baronne, which is like a Griffin on crack, as it just pops one card as well, and a Chenging, which is completely nuts in turn 3. In this deck, I started to build this as my end board, as it's just very hard for them to out. But then you lose the Draco back bounce, and you also lose harder 2 cards like Lava Golem and Sphere Mode. So I decided not to do that, as I wanted to keep the Draco back bounce alive. But what I did do, which is very important and I can highly recommend to you guys, is actually summoning the Griffin and then synchroning it off into the Baronne, but actually keeping the token on the field, not going for Chenging. And then most of the times where you would do a Crystal Ring route, you will just completely skip that, as Crystal Ring barely does something in most matchups if the Eldlich variant is highly on other engines like the Branded, Dogma, whatever, where Monster Negate can actually come up. You can think about using it, but most importantly, I just go for an M7, get back a Lulu, or at best, get actually a Griffin. So you can enter on both Griffin and Baronne, which is insane. Having 2 Omni Negates against Eldlich is so strong. And at worst, this is just a Crystal Wing which shuffles itself back, so if the opponent does use the Eldlich to get rid of one card, to send it to the graveyard, we can just use the Griffin Rider to negate that. It's basically the same as the Crystal Wing up at this point. So this is definitely something I picked up. Talking about the side deck, you see I'm not really that prepared for the Eldlich matchup, just because we do have such a nice engine into it. We definitely only need one of those cards, and they are super applicable into lots of matchups apart from the Red Reboot, but both Prankatops and Lightning Storm can be applied into different matchups and are very good going second cards in general. So I'm actually not preparing too hard for the matchup itself. What I am siding out though are all of these cards. So Token Collector gets out, Talents goes out, and Droplets go out. And I side in all of these 4 cards and the Ghost Bells, just so that, like I said, every card in my hand is available and alive to some degree and to some point. Of course, some are better, some are worse. I definitely rather see a Lightning Storm and Pankatops or Red Reboot than I'd like to see a Ghost Bell going second. But most importantly, you just need to get your cards alive, and Virtual World probably has the most versatile engine in game right now. As it dodges all the floodgates which are common, and it has Chuchas to out problematic cards, and you even have a Qinglong to out stuff like Winder, which is of course not applicable currently, but it's still something to think about. So we have a very nice time to play through all of these floodgates and everything. So definitely make use of it and don't overfill your side deck. I basically don't have anything to add here. Apart from that Zeus is your friend. Like I said, Zeus is super good and you definitely should value it. I try to use Zeus as something as a board breaker, and I can generally advise you not to do that, as Zeus can be so strong at trading 1 to 4, 1 to 3, whatever. So using it as a 1-for-1 trade to get rid of that 1 Solemn Strike is very bad. I tried it out. There may be some times where this is the correct play, but in general, don't use Zeus to break the board, but try to end on it, as it's super easy to just end on a Zeus with very limited resources. So at best, don't use it to break boards. This is probably the last thing I wanted to add. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I hope you could learn something, and I hope you can step up your game against Eldlich. You guys are dismissed. Class is out. Professor Sunreis out. Peace.